He's my dad. He gives good advice, and that's why this special episode of the Matthew West podcast is called Dadvice.
He is my dad, and he gives good advice, and that's why this segment is called Dadvice.
Dad, thanks for joining me this week. Do you have a Dadvice or a dad joke?
A dad joke? Okay.
What do you got for us?
Let's try this one. Why don't fish play basketball?
I don't know.
Because they are scared of the net.
This is good.
All right.
Yeah,
Is that making people laugh?
Very good.
Not so much, huh? So,
what are we talking about today?
We're going to talk about the power of a story. We're going to zero in on Paul's story and our story real quick. And of course, you're all in on stories. In a couple of months, we are going to have an outdoor concert at one of my favorite churches. We're going to be in Murfreesboro, Tennessee.
World Outreach
Center. What a church. And I'd encourage people to check the tour schedule and come out and join us if they're in the area. But the reason it is my favorite church, thousands come, and each time they have a concert, they baptize people in great numbers. They have a pool right next to the stage, and just a continual flow of young people, teenagers, kids, adults sharing their story through baptism and confessing Christ to the world. And that's what we're called to do, and that's what baptism exemplifies too. Our key verse today is Romans 1:16. For I am not ashamed of the gospel, for it is the power of God for salvation to everyone who believes. Paul's declaration speaks to each of us. He stated that he was not ashamed and followed it up with the reason why. He says, because the gospel is the power of God on display to save a soul. Here are two takeaways. There is power in the gospel. Paul's story, this power is capable of transforming lives. In our key verse, Paul states that he is not ashamed of the gospel. To Paul, the gospel is not merely a set of beliefs to defend, but a life-transforming power that leads to a well-grounded hope. This is the only one of many instances where Paul unashamedly and under great persecution proclaimed his own story, transformed by the power of the cross. I love Galatians 2:20. Paul says, I have been crucified with Christ, and I no longer live, but Christ lives in me. The life I now live in the body, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. Secondly, and we say this all the time, there is power in our story. Each one of us, each one listening today, there's power in your story, and let God use you, share it. Just like Paul, we have experienced a life-changing, life-saving power of the gospel. Paul shared his story, and lives were drawn to Jesus. Lives will be drawn to Jesus when we share our salvation story with others. It's your story. You know it. The power of God that lives within you enables you to share it. Then you could say with Paul, I'm not ashamed to tell everyone about someone that changed my life. Some lyrics. I'm unashamed of the gospel of Jesus Christ and the truth that changed my life. I close with this powerful illustration that took place mostly all of 24 and the start of 2025. And if you remember those stories and are hearing them now about revival that's taking place on college campuses across America. One example of revival is on the campus of the Ohio State University.
I saw that,
Started by the football players who began to share their story, and they'd get up in the quad or whatever you call it, and they shared about Jesus and how Jesus saved them, and they had tons of baptisms.
It's incredible.
Thousands of kids gathered, and the revival was just incredible. And then the Ohio State football team goes on and wins the national championship in January, and many of the players were interviewed, and I got articles and pictures and sharing how they gave God the glory, they gave Jesus the glory, and that Jesus had saved them. These revivals are turning the tide. Research reports that in the Gen Z population, which is a majority of today's college students, only 17% call themselves Christians. But because of the students and athletes unashamedly sharing the gospel, that percentage is certainly changing. My advice today is look at what God has done in your own life. Let that transformation empower you to share your story.
Yeah, man, that's awesome. That scripture you shared that Paul said, "For I am not ashamed of the gospel," that was the core verse for the writing of that song, Unashamed. And I loved how plainly spoken that scripture was, and I wanted the song's lyrics to be as plainly spoken. I think a lot of times when I'm writing a song, I can try to be poetic, and it's like, but there's sometimes you're writing a song, and the theme of the song demands for it just to be not trying to be flowery or poetic in your delivery, but just like this is my creed almost. Like this is my mission, my motto. And I think a lot of times people doubt, does my story have power? And when we get discouraged to think our story doesn't have power, one of the reasons I think we get discouraged is because we're looking to ourselves to be the source of that power. And if we look to ourselves, then it's true. Our stories will have no power. It's like, your computer's no good unless you plug it into the power source, and then it's going to be, that battery's going to get charged. And so just a reminder that your story has great power, but you're not the source of that power. Your story has to get plugged into a greater source of power. And when you trust God, then that's where the true purpose and power of your story is going to be discovered. May we all live our lives unashamed for Jesus. I love that Ohio State example too. I was
powerful?
with Christian Stanfill, who's a worship leader from Passion, and he and I was telling him my daughter had gone to University of Tennessee. He's like, I just got back from there, did this huge revival, thousands of kids getting saved and baptized, and we wound up writing a song called Come to Jesus, inspired by the experience of the revivals taking place at these college campuses.
Awesome.
And full circle, he played the song at the Passion Conference where revivals break it. And so it's such a cool thing. So thanks for being here, Dad. Thank you for listening to Dadvice. Go to popwe.org today for more inspirational resources for you. If you're saying, man, I've got a story, I don't know how to share it, I want to be a better witness for Christ, go to popwe.org. We've got some great resources there to help you learn how to craft, share, and live a more meaningful story with your life. popwe.org today. Thank you all for listening. It's your story for His glory. See you next week.